Good, pretty busy. Oh, awful. Man. This is Scott the Fix Guy. We're dealing with a squeaky Frigidaire dryer. We're going to replace the rear bearing. That was the part number. So we're going to put a little tape on the back of the dryer right in the middle, right behind the rear bearing. And that's to hold on a little piece of metal that'll help us later on. We're going to unplug it or turn off the breaker. And then we're going to remove the two Phillips head screws from behind the top panel. And we spin those off, and then we can take the top panel off. Push it away, lift it up, get that out of the way. And then we need to remove 4 Phillips head screws from the top, 2 in the upper right hand corner, and 2 in the upper left hand corner. And then there's actually a few more screws we have to remove to get the front panel off. So get those 4 off. We're going to take off this little plastic piece that retains the drum tumbler. We're going to get that off. And we're going to cut this zip tie that holds the electrical connectors. We'll disconnect the electrical connectors just by pinching and pulling them apart. And then we have to remove these screws from the bottom that are helping to stack the dryer. And we're going to lift up the dryer a little bit, put something there to hold it, and we're going to remove 2 more Phillips head screws from the bottom part of the front panel. So now we're removing 2 screws that are about 3 inches down on the inside of upper left, upper right hand corner. Just 2 Phillips head screws that are holding the front panel on. Now we're going to pry the panel off by pulling back and lifting up with a standard head screwdriver to kind of pry up these metal tabs to get them to loosen up. I'm going to use the screwdriver also to pry in between the cabinet and the front panel to help me get this thing loose. Get a little leverage right here. And then I can pull the panel toward me. I can lift up a little bit, pull it toward me, and then I can get the panel off of the dryer and get that out of the way. And then I can remove the belt from underneath the dryer. What I'll do is I'll reach in with my right and left hands on either side of the tumbler, and I'm going to pull back on the idler wheel, which is spring loaded, and then I'll pull the belt off of the motor pulley. And then if I get that belt off, then I can lift up on the tumbler. I have to lift up the back of it about 2 inches to get the ball part of the bearing off of a cup. If I get that up off of that cup, then I can pull the whole tumbler toward me and get the tumbler out of there. That'll give me access to the rear bearing. Sometimes I'll lift up on the belt to help me to get it out of there. Just take your time. Again, it's important to lift up on the back about 2 inches before you pull it out. There we go. Get the belt out of there, and you can do a little cleaning, make sure all the lint's gone. Here's the old rear bearing and the new rear bearing. We're going to be replacing that also. Next thing is we'll get this little plastic cup that holds that ball ready. So we're going to get this lubricant opened up, and we're going to squirt a bunch of it into this cup. Basically want to use the whole tube. We're going to put a little bit of that lubricant behind this cup. We're going to use it as a way to stick on a little ball bearing. Looks like a BB, silver BB that comes with the kit. We want to just stick that onto the back of it, and then we're going to take the metal plate that comes with the kit, and we're going to put that on the front of the plastic cup. And we're going to feed 2 long screws through the plate and through the plastic cup. And these are all parts that come with the kit. It comes with the ball bearing, comes with the cup, comes with the new rear bearing, comes with a little metal plate, and comes with these new screws. And it comes with 3 new Phillips head screws to hold the bearing onto the drum. So now we got it all ready, and we're going to remove, there's that little ball bearing that we just pushed on with the grease to hold it. We're going to remove the old cup. Remember, if you have the tape on the back, it's going to hold the piece of metal that holds these screws in place. If you don't have it there, when you remove the screws, that little metal plate will drop, and the screws have nothing to bite into. So it's really important that you have that tape back there to hold that piece of metal in position. So we'll go ahead and put in the new assembly. Look at the old one's pretty worn out. I'm going to put it in position, and then we're going to just tighten up those 2 screws, and that'll hold that cup in position. Got those 2. Looks good. So that's a big part of our assembly. Now we'll have to also put the new rear bearing on the tumbler. Here's the old one. So before we put it on, we're going to put these new Phillips head screws into the bearing, and using our screw gun, we're going to screw them on tight. This cuts new threads into the bearing and makes the screws a lot easier to put on later in the assembly. So it's real important to do this, and you want to go into each of these 3 screw holes. So you kind of start it with your fingers and then use your screw gun to really push in. It's actually cutting into the metal new threads. And again, it makes it a lot easier in the next step. So I'm just doing this by myself, so I'm going to use this really long Phillips head screwdriver to be able to reach around here to unloosen these 3 screws that are holding on the bearing. If you have a friend helping you, you don't really need a real long screwdriver like this. They can kind of hold the bearing for you. So I'm removing the 3 screws. One of them, though, after I loosen it, I'll kind of keep it inside the drum still, in position as a guide for the new bearing. So I got the old one off, and now I'll put the new one in position. I have one little screw still kind of in there that I'll use to help as a guide. Get that hooked up, and then I'll reach around with my long Phillips head screwdriver, and I'll start that screw. I'll push that screw in and get it started into the new bearing, and that'll give me something to hold that bearing into position while I put the next 2 screws in. Again, if you have your friend holding it, it's super easy. So I'm just going to line up that bearing with the other screw holes. There we go, and then I can put in the next 2 screws. So I'll use this long screwdriver, and I'll get those next 2 going. You do want to get these screws really tight because you don't want this bearing to loosen up. The rear bearing and front bearing help support the weight of the tumbler as it spins. So if these get loose, then the rear bearing can come off, and then it won't spin right at all. Just getting those super tight. Now I'll put the tumbler back in, and I have to lift the ball bearing in the back up a little bit so it can sit into that plastic cup. So I come in at a slight angle and then let it drop down into that cup. And then I'm going to spin the tumbler a little bit to make sure that it is in that cup. And then I'll need to put the belt back on. So I'm going to put the belt around. I want to make sure you have the rubber side facing the tumbler and the cloth side of the belt facing up. And I'm going to kind of line it up on the mark of where it shows up on the tumbler of where the old belt used to be. So I'm going to line that up, and then I'll put in this little plastic thing that holds the tumbler in position. And I've already tightened the belt back up. What I did is I reached in again with my right and left hand. I pulled back on the idler wheel to take the tension off of it, and then I put the belt onto the motor pulley. And then I did a few more spins to make sure that it's all lined up. Probably good to spin the tumbler about 4 or 5 times before you put it all back together, just to confirm that the belt's lined up. I'm pulling all the crud out of this ducting while I have this open, and that'll just help the dryer to dry a lot better. You just reach in and pull out all that lint. So we got the belt back on, the belt's tight. Now we can put the front panel back on. So we'll lift it up, put the bottom part in position first so it's a bit of an angle, and then we're going to feed in the front panel toward the cabinet. We're going to lift up on the tumbler so that we can get it back up onto that felt bearing. Got to make sure we get the wires pushed in. Just take your time here. And then you want to lift up these metal tabs on the upper right, upper left hand corner and use a screwdriver to help to pry them up so they fit into the slots here in the upper right, upper left corner. They'll fit in, those tabs will fit right into those slots. Once you have that all lined up, then you can put the Phillips head screws back in that hold the panel in position. So we're just putting those 2 screws in each corner back in. Got to make sure the panel's pushed, front panel's pushed way back into the cabinet so those screws will line up with the holes. There we go. Just confirming we have everything back. And there's a couple more screws we have to put in. First we're going to reconnect this electrical connector. The 2 of them, we'll just click them back. It can only go one way. Got it. So I got to put in these 2 Phillips head screws that go upper left, upper right hand corner. They're about 3 inches down and they come in on the inside here of the cabinet. And there are 2 screws we have to put in the bottom right, bottom left hand corner from the front that hold on the bottom. There we go, here's the 2 we're putting in the bottom. I've lifted up the dryer a little bit. I put something in between the dryer and the washer to give me some access room here. Gotta make sure I line up the holes. This dryer was nice and quiet when we got done with this procedure, and that's going to last maybe another 5 to 6 years. So we're going to put a little zip tie to hold those wires in place, get them kind of up away from the tumbler. Cut off the excess. And thanks so much for watching, and please subscribe to our channel when you get a chance.